And then the other part of your background is in human-centered leadership. So for anybody who's not familiar with that, what's a whistle-stop tour of what that actually means? Because it kind of sounds a bit thought leadership, right? It sounds a bit buzzwordy, but what does it actually mean?
It's it is, and it's interesting because I for a long time have danced around with what it's called, and centered was probably a coin phrase, right? That made it as accessible as possible. But what it is realizing that we are human beings, and that's the type of leadership that you should be paying attention to. And the difference being is that there's a lot of like when you go get your MBA, when you're trained in leadership, when you're doing all that kind of stuff, they spend the majority of their time focusing on systems and tools and that kind of very analytical process to managing people and leading people are very different things, right? So managing people, really, you're not managing people, you're managing tasks, right? And there is a very logical way to sort that out, right? And that's what we tend to lean towards in school, in teaching, because logic's easy to teach, right? And it's easy to learn. It's memory, right? Whereas human behavior, human leadership skills, human-centered leadership skills are all understanding the human being at the core and how to motivate them, how to drive them, how to, access the empathy, the trust, the compassion, the connection, all of those pieces, which are fuzzy and hard to teach and hard to, quantify. So that's the difference. I work on the humaning side and lean towards that, whereas a lot of other leadership consultants would work on the systems, analytics, all that kind of management side.
Laugh when you're talking about that because it sparks a lot of memories of from my own leadership experience. And I came very much from that background of being thrown in at the deep end without the education. I never got the MBA or the leadership qualifications, and you were just expected to sink or swim. And I swam,
Right.
often in spite of the support and tutoring that I was getting, as opposed to because of it. And it felt like something that organization really battled with for a long time was they were determined to try and make more good leaders in their business, and they went about that by teaching them to be good managers. And the good leaders still became good leaders in spite of all of that, but they could never seem to bottle that to create more of that. And the more they tried to follow the management route and teach people the management route, the more failure they created within the business, but couldn't really identify the root cause as to why. And actually, a lot of it stemmed from upper leadership. So it's
Yeah.
interesting that it's a
Yeah.
vicious
Heard it
circle
so
of
many times. It's so true, and it's indicative of the world that we live in, and I get it. It's because I mean the reality is humaning is hard. It's hard. We're complex. We all have different languages, and I don't mean verbal. I mean just subconscious languages that we understand and speak, and paying attention to that takes work, right? And it takes practice. It's not something that comes instantly to people. Some people are like, yeah, natural born leader, natural, and there's certain qualities that we all have that some lead more into being applicable to leadership. It could be coding. We have certain qualities that lead into coding. Like it's that kind of thing is there for sure. But leadership itself is learned. It's the same as marketing. It's a learned skill. You just don't come out of the womb amazing at it, right? And unfortunately, over time, we've always just kind of had it as a sink or swim type learning method, right? It's like, okay, you were great at doing this task, right? And this kind of thing. You're great in this field. So now what we want you to do is we want you to lead a whole bunch of people who are good at that. You're not doing the task anymore. You're leading people to do the task, right? Which is a totally different skill set, right? So it's a I'm reiterating what you're saying, but it's one of those things where
yeah,
it's like, okay, so now you're leading people. So what does that look like, right? What is that?
yeah.
Humans are hard. So how do we motivate them? Can you motivate a human? How do I keep them from, lynching me as a leader? How do there's so much, and then all your own
Gold.
insecurities and your own jam in there, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
ah, classic.
It's an example I see a lot in the sales environment. The best salesperson
Hmm.
gets promoted as leader of the sales team. And then guess what
Yeah.
happens? Chaos. Because they're now responsible for their own targets that they originally had, plus everybody else's, and no idea how to motivate people other than to beat them with a
Yeah.
big stick. It's a painful lesson. It's a painful lesson. So I wonder then, human-centered leadership, can you translate that into human-centered marketing?
It really is. It's the principles of leading people are totally transferable to leading your marketing campaign because again, you're also leading people. And I think people overcomplicate it, really is what happens to it. When you are trying to connect with your team, you have to use empathy, trust, connection, right? Listening. You have to be really in tune with them. You have to be hearing what it is that they're saying in a way that is much deeper than the surface level. Well, how is that any different than the people that you're marketing to? It shouldn't be if it is. And those kind of things too. Like, are you focused so heavily on the task, right? That you are forgetting about the human being who's doing the task? Take it to marketing. Are you so focused on the, advantages that or the little widgets and things that, the technical things that your product does or can, that kind of stuff? Or are you focused on the people who are going to be actually using or should want to use your product? Those are different focuses, right? One is going to attract a huge amount of people and create a following and a loyalty and a commitment, whether it's in leadership or marketing. And the other one is, it's interesting. I ramble on a little bit, but in the world of humaning, we're governed by two parts of the brain. And people probably heard this before, and it's common now that we know it, but we have our conscious mind and our subconscious. Our subconscious mind is what I talk about when I'm talking about humaning. Our conscious mind, it really only does about like 1 to 5% of stuff. It's really not that active. We pretend that it's the big one driving the bus, but it's not. The subconscious mind is the one that's making all the decisions. Your conscious mind just justifies the decisions you made, right? So like, even I see it all the time. We at the house too, and I do it too. I'm like, I just bought this new microphone. Why did you buy that? Well, because it has this, 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 and this. I'm like, I have 3 microphones. I don't need another microphone, but it makes me feel good to have one, right? So I feel great. Something drove me. I had a need.